In this video, we will show you how to replace your front brake caliper on this Chevy Silverado. This is part of your brakes located behind your front wheel. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we need to do is make sure you're in a safe area. We're going to raise and support the front of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. Once you've completed that, go ahead and remove your center cover, assuming you have one, using a 22mm for each of these plastic lugs. With that out of the way, we'll continue on to all 6 of our 22mm lug nuts, and we can remove the wheel. Now that we have the wheel out of the way, we have a close look at our caliper. We're paying attention for our bleeder screw. We're going to open this up, wait till we see a steady trickle of fluid so we know it does actually open, and then we're going to make our way into the vehicle and step down on the brake and hold it there with something such as a pry bar. Of course, you do want to have a collection receptacle for your brake fluid. I'm using a 3/8 socket here. Okay, we have that pressed down. Now we can see fluid is not making its way out of this area. Go ahead and close that bleeder screw. Continuing on, let's look right in this area here. You should be able to see your brake rotor and your brake pads. We're going to use a small prying device directly up against that brake rotor and the caliper, and we essentially just want to be pushing the caliper outward, which would be pushing in each of our 2 caliper pistons. We don't need to go very far here. Okay, we've got a little bit of movement there. Now we'll move just underneath that area to where our flex hose connects onto the caliper. This is your banjo bolt. We're only going to break this free, and then we'll lightly snug it at this point. Using an 11mm for this. Okay, get some movement. Now we're going to dislodge the caliper from the caliper bracket. To do that, it's very simple, using an 18mm for each of your 2 slider pins. As you remove these, we're just going to pull them out, a quick inspection, and we'll slide the first one back in while we continue on to the second. When removing your slider pins, you need to inspect the threaded area, and this area right where my index finger is. This is where that boot is going to sit. We need to make sure we clean up each one of the caliper slider pins, especially in this area, making its way all the way down along the smooth surface, confirming there's no rot or damage. There's one. Let's go ahead and get the other one out of there. Should be able to start moving this around. Sometimes you have to use a pry bar. I typically just like to give these a quick inspection. We are replacing it, but the flex hose is a point of interest. If anything looks like it's damaged, you want to, of course, replace the flex hose. For now, we're going to temporarily set this aside, putting no pressure on the flex hose or our ABS wire. Now we can remove the brake pads from this area. Ours are actually stuck in the brackets here. I'm looking at them. I can tell that it needs them. Generally, you should be able to just pull these out, a quick inspection. If they look great, you can go ahead and set them aside. You should never have to hammer out your brake pads. If you do, this can happen. Now that I have those out of there, we'll just do a quick comparison between the old pad and a brand new one. Like I said, if yours are worn, just go ahead and get some new ones. Next, we're going to remove the caliper bracket from this area by removing two 18mm headed mounting bolts. You can see one up along the top here and one located just below it. Just as before, go ahead and remove the first one, a quick inspection, start it back in a couple threads. Go ahead and set that aside for recycling. The next thing we'll do is clean and inspect the steering knuckle on the mounting points here. I just like to use a wire brush, a light scuffing. You can do that on both sides. Now, before we go any further with our original caliper, we're going to focus on the brand new caliper over on the bench for a second. Go ahead and remove your two caliper slider pins. For the new caliper slider pins, you're going to be using a T55 Torx. You can see right in there, it looks like a star. Just go ahead and pull both those out. Now we have this portion of the caliper. We'll set this aside temporarily and we're going to focus on the bracket. Looking at the caliper itself, there's two areas that we're going to be paying attention to, and that's where the caliper bracket tins will sit. Go ahead and use some high temperature lubricant in each of these areas. Now it's time to install our caliper bracket tins. If you were looking at the tins, you'll find that one side is a little bit wider than the other side, so you just want to go ahead and match it up with the caliper bracket. We'll slide that into position. Just press that on there. There we are. Should be a nice tight fit. We'll do the same for the other one. Let's have a look at our slider pins. Typically, they're going to come with some assembly lubricant on them. If you happen to have any type of thread locker, you can go ahead and clean that off the threaded portion. Now we'll add some high temperature caliper lubricant to these pins. You want to go ahead and lubricate the entire smooth surface going along this area here. And then we're also going to make our way up into this groove, but not necessarily into the threaded portion. There's one. Go ahead and do the same to the other one, and we'll set those aside temporarily, and then we'll gain focus on the rest of that caliper. Continuing with our high temperature caliper lubricant, we're going to add some of that along each one of our caliper pistons. Just need it on the metal aspect there. With both of those done, we'll continue on to the backside of each of the three ears. All of this will help with vibration dampening and noise reduction overall. Now we're done with this portion of the caliper for now. We can get this bracket back over to the vehicle. Now we can get the caliper bracket in place. We're going to start in each of our two mounting bolts. Once you have both of them started in, snug them up and torque those to 129 foot-pounds. Our torque wrench. Now we're going to install our brake pads. If when you're trying to install the inboard pad, you find that you have a hard time pressing it in, it's typically due to your wear indicator. Now to cure this, you can either carefully flex it in, you can do that by finger, or just tap it on with a hammer just a tiny bit towards the brake pad. Or you could loosen the bracket so it can move around, and then you should be able to slide this into place. Let's get that outer pad in place as well. press that in. Both of these pads should be able to move around. Now we can get the rest of the caliper in place. That's going to slide right over those brake pads. When installing it, you also need to pay attention to your caliper slider pin boots. Make sure they're not folded over where they could get damaged. And we'll continue on sliding in each one of our 2 caliper slider pins. Once you have them started in by hand, go ahead and snug them up. The torque for these is 80 foot-pounds. Continuing on, we're going to separate the brake flex hose from the caliper. Make sure you have a collection receptacle under this area just in case any fluid does come out. Also, you do not want to do this above your brand new brakes where brake fluid might contaminate them. Using our 11mm here. You can set that aside for recycling. Separate that flex hose. As for the caliper itself, you want to make sure you empty this out into your collection receptacle properly, and then you can recycle the caliper as well. There it is, friend. Now that we have that apart, we're going to focus on the flex hose itself. We want to make sure that the area where your brand new banjo bolt goes through and where your copper gasket is clean and free of any miscellaneous debris. I can see there's raised areas here. Let's have a look along the backside. Now in this area, you can see that we still have our original gasket still in place. We're going to remove that. You never reuse your original gasket, and it's extremely important that you never double gasket, which would mean applying a new gasket on top of this one. There's that one. Now we'll just go ahead and continue on by cleaning this up, and we'll set it aside. Now we can remove our protective cover from the brand new caliper. In with your caliper, you're going to find it came with a brand new banjo bolt and 2 brand new gaskets. We'll take our banjo bolt and one of our brand new gaskets. We're just going to slide that right on there. Continuing on, we'll slide it through that brake flex hose. On the opposite side of the flex hose, we have our second gasket. At this point, there's a gasket on each side of the flex hose. Let's get this in place into the caliper. We'll start it in by hand and snug it up. We want to make sure we have it at this angle. Now once that's bottomed out, I'm just going to continue on with a hand ratchet. We want to feel this out. Essentially, we want to continue snugging it so all the contact points are making positive contact. So right there is bottomed out. We'll just take it a tiny bit further here, confirming we're lightly squishing each one of those gaskets, holding everything in place. A light wiggle to confirm it's properly secured. Now we can remove pressure from our brake pedal and make our way under the hood. Under the hood, we're looking for the master cylinder. We're going to remove the cap here. Before we remove it, you want to make sure you remove any miscellaneous debris from in this area so nothing falls inside of the braking system. We don't want to contaminate that fluid. Go ahead and take hold of the cap. We're going to turn it counterclockwise, lift it up and away from the port so nothing falls inside. A quick inspection of that cap. Now we can make our way back down to the wheel. We have a collection receptacle under this area. You can remove your bleeder screw cover from that bleeder screw. Continuing on, we're going to gravity bleed, so we want to make sure we have a collection receptacle so we can recycle all the fluid properly. With the master cylinder cap open, we're going to open up the bleeder screw and wait till we see a steady trickle of fluid making its way out. There's a 10mm for this. This may take a minute. Now that we have a steady trickle of fluid coming from here, we can go ahead and close this off. At this point, you want to make your way up inside the passenger compartment, pump up the brake pedal, and confirm it feels firm. If for some reason it feels soft and squishy, you want to continue on with a manual brake bleed. There could still be air trapped in the system. Assuming it does feel good, go ahead and clean your mess and reinstall your bleeder screw cover. One last quick inspection in this area and we can reinstall our wheel. Once it's in place, go ahead and start on all 6 of your 22mm lug nuts. We'll bottom them out, get the wheel safely back down on the ground, and we'll torque each of these to 140 foot-pounds. We've got the wheel on the ground. We'll be torquing these in a crisscross manner. Torqued. If you have a center cover, go ahead and install that now. When you're tightening those plastic lugs, you never want to use an impact tool. It can cause damage. Now we're back under the hood and we're going to top off that fluid up to our maximum. That looks good. Okay, friend, we finished our installation. The next thing you need to do is go ahead and hop in the passenger compartment. Make sure that that brake pedal's nice and firm. Go ahead and take your vehicle for a road test and test the functionality. Thanks for watching. Okay, friend, let's get started on our job. To be able to bleed the brakes, we want to make sure we have some brand new .3 brake fluid and, of course, some parts cleaner. Under the hood, we're looking for the master cylinder. We're going to remove the cap here. Before we remove it, you want to make sure you remove any miscellaneous debris from in this area so nothing falls inside of the braking system. We don't want to contaminate that fluid. Go ahead and take hold of the cap. We're going to turn it counterclockwise, lift it up and away from the port so nothing falls inside. A quick inspection of that cap. Continuing on, we're going to remove as much of the brake fluid as possible. I have a clean extraction device here. Let's put that right inside the master cylinder. Look at how dirty that fluid is. We'll make sure we recycle all this fluid properly. Once you've removed as much fluid as possible, we're going to add our brand new .3 brake fluid up to our maximum line. Now that we have that topped off, we're just going to take that cap, we'll put it in position. Now that we've done that, we're going to make our way into the passenger side rear wheel well. This is where we're going to start our brake bleed procedure. Along the back side of the caliper is where you're going to find your bleeder screw. If there's a bleeder screw cover, go ahead and remove that. For this bleeder screw on the rear, we're going to be using a 10mm. Now to bleed this, once you have that open, it's going to be easiest if you have a second person. They're going to be inside the passenger compartment pumping up the brake pedal. Once they're holding it, we're going to open up the bleeder screw and watch for air and dirty fluid making its way out. Repeat this process several times until it's only clean, new brake fluid making its way out of this bleeder screw, and we'll close it off, clean our mess, and then make our way over to the other side of the vehicle and repeat the exact same process. Let's get that bleeder screw cover off of there. Go ahead and pump up the brake pedal, please. Go ahead and pump. You can release, thank you. Just make sure we close this off. Now at this point, we have no air coming from the passenger side rear caliper. We're going to go over to the driver's side and repeat this exact same process once we've cleaned our mess and reinstalled our bleeder screw cover. After that, just go ahead and make your way up to the master cylinder and top it off. Now we're back under the hood. Go ahead and open that up. And top it off again, right up to that maximum. Perfect. Reinstall that cap. Now we finished topping off the master cylinder. We're over at the passenger side front. We've got our collection receptacle under here. Go ahead and pump up the brake pedal, please. Go ahead and pump. This is looking good. Go ahead and pump. That's perfect. You can release the brake pedal, thank you. Just clean up our mess on this caliper here, reinstall our bleeder screw cover, repeat this process on the driver's side, and then move up to the master cylinder. Now that we finished bleeding all the brakes, we're back up under the hood one last time here. Go ahead and remove the cap, and we're going to top off that fluid up to our maximum. That looks good. Okay, friend, we finished our brake bleed. The last thing you want to do is just make sure you've cleaned up all your mess, double check for leaks, reinstall the wheels, torque those to 140 foot-pounds, close the hood, take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.